Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. I'm really excited for this one because it's going to be one of a couple in a series where I'm talking with people that I have worked with before as they grew their freelance career, and they're going to kind of share their stories about how they started, like what was the middle of their journey look like, and what are they kind of doing now. And today's guest is a great example of the what comes next after you've sort of hit your freelancing goals. I see this a lot with freelancers that I coach, and that they hit this point where they're like, okay, I feel like I've really optimized my freelance business as much as I can. I like my clients. I know what my hours and my pitching schedule looks like. Now I want to think about doing something else. I want to fold in a hobby or another business or branch into something different altogether. So welcome to the show. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself for everyone who is listening?
Sure. Thank you, Lauren. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Alyssa, or Ali Goulet, and I'm a full-time freelance copywriter and content strategist. I work with B2B SaaS and IT clients, and now I'm working on all sorts of offers and content to help other people do what I do, because it's been a really great journey for me.
Yeah, that's awesome. Let's start there. Like, how did you discover freelancing and writing as a possible career or business for yourself?
Yeah. So it was kind of by accident, because I was working in a job that I really wasn't happy with. And all I knew was that I wanted to stop doing that. Mm-hmm. And what that turned into was me applying for a bunch of remote gigs, because I thought, hey, this might be a good way for me to take control over my schedule. So I pitched all kinds of things, from writing to social media management to podcast, guest outreach, and radio outreach. I ended up doing a lot of those different things and landing a lot of those gigs, but freelance writing was the one that I liked the most, just because I always had an interest in writing.
I think that something that's really hard for aspiring writers is feeling like you're qualified enough, right? So I hear from lots of new freelance writers, I don't even know what my sample should be. How can I pitch myself to someone when I don't really have any writing credentials? I don't have any clips. I don't have any training. Did you face any of those sort of mental obstacles as you were getting started?
Definitely. I think that's a natural thing to deal with, especially because if you're going the freelance route in particular, like, you are on your own, right? So not only maybe you don't have any credentials, but you're also like, okay, and I'm trying to now quote, run a business or this side hustle by myself. It's really hard. And so what I leaned on in the beginning is I pitched things that spoke to, something I was learning about in college. I was in college at the time. Or something that I already had an interest in. So even though I couldn't say, I have this credential or a decade of experience, I could say that I was invested in a particular topic or industry. And that seemed to help along the way.
That's perfect. And I think that's a great example of using your time in college or learning overall to figure out, is this something that you want to do? It's going to get you great additional experience. It could point you in the direction of a full-time job, and you use that experience to get that position, or it could lead you to realize that you may be interested in working for yourself. So tell me how your business sort of evolved from that point. I know you've invested a few times with different programs and people in your business, which I think is a really, really smart move. Tell me more about your decision to do that, and how did that serve you? How did you know you were ready to get help? Because obviously you jumped over that massive hurdle of getting those first couple of clients, but what sort of happened next?
Yeah. So in the beginning, I didn't spend any money on any resources, just because for me, from my perspective, I wanted to prove to myself that I could bring in a little bit of money doing this before I made any sort of investment. So for a while, I wasn't investing in anything, but it was after I graduated and I decided, hey, this is going pretty well. I want to take this full time, but I wasn't making enough to actually make a full-time living yet doing this. I was bringing in some, but it wasn't enough. And so that's when I invested in my first coaching program. That went really, really well. And I accomplished all the things that I set out to accomplish. And that's when I realized the power in investing in your business and getting help when you sort of recognize a weak spot in your business. And so from there, I've just continued to invest as I found those areas where, maybe it's been a little too difficult to figure it all out on my own.
Yeah. And that's an important point, right? Because you may be able to figure out pieces of this on your own. And it's not that there's something wrong with you, that you're at a new level or you hit a point where you're stuck and you're like, okay, I really don't know what my next step looks like, or I really don't know how to create that from scratch and make sure that it aligns with my business and life. And I think a lot of freelancers are very similar to you in that they start spending nothing, right? Like at the beginning of our business, we have time. As your company grows, you go from that mindset of, okay, I have time, but not money. And it flips. And you're like, okay, now I have money, but not time. And I don't want to spend 6 months scouring every podcast, every free resource that's out there. I really want to figure out a way to fast track to get to the thing that I'm doing next. So I think that that's really smart on your part. Now, as you started working with different companies and sort of getting this different experience, a lot of writers especially panic about this idea of a portfolio, right? Because you don't have anything when you get started. I always teach people create samples that are similar to what you would want to sell to a potential freelance client. Where do you think the role is of a portfolio or work samples when it comes to getting clients when you've got no other experience?
It is the way that you're going to get clients in the door. Like it really is the only way, because if you have no experience, no credentials, no online presence, and even when you do have those things, people want to see that you can do what you say that you can do. Mm-hmm. And so it's so important. It played an absolutely critical role in me starting my business, and it continues to play a big role today, even when people are reaching out to me instead of the other way around.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When you're first getting started, there's so many things you don't have. You don't have a referral system. You don't have past clients who are maybe booking you into retainers yet. You're probably starting off with those small one-time projects. And it can feel like you don't have any of the pieces to take things to the next level. But portfolios and work samples are not things that you need to overthink. You can say, okay, even if I'm a website designer, I can make a fake website, or I can make my own website for my freelance web design business and use that as a work sample of what I do. Because I think clients are much more likely to judge you on their perception of your style and talent than a lot of people realize. So a lot of writers might go, well, I don't have a byline anywhere. I haven't published a book. I don't have extensive examples of my history as a writer, but there's something about writing where if you can capture somebody's voice, then that really can hook their interest, even if you're not well known. And I see a lot of writers get started this way. How did you discover, you work very specifically in the sort of tech and SaaS space. How did you discover that was a potential niche for you?
Yeah. So it was weird because for me, if you had told me that I was going to be doing a lot of B2B tech writing when I first started this, I probably would have laughed because I didn't even know what B2B meant. Mm-hmm. But for me, it all came out of, I tried to be strategic in pitching jobs that kind of touched more than one industry. So for example, one of the first freelance writing jobs I ever had was working for a music technology company. They were a software that consumers could use. So I studied music business in college. And so I had that going for me. And I was like, this is interesting. Like, I'm interested in tech. Let's see if I like this. And I kind of followed that pattern all throughout the different jobs that I pitched. And I found that I really liked working with tech clients. So that was the approach that I took.
That's so important, because having a niche that finds you is so much more of an organic path than saying, all right, this is what I've done in my past, so I think I can try to mold this to fit my freelance business. So it's very common for new freelancers to start off, and maybe you're niching a little bit, maybe you're targeting down your prospective clients slightly, but you haven't quite found your footing. And it is okay to be a generalist, or it is okay to say, I haven't decided what my perfect niche is yet, but I know I like working in these 3 to 4 areas. You don't need to commit to that right away. But overall, can you talk a little bit more about how niching has helped, or even if it didn't help, like how has that affected your business to specifically kind of say, this is who I'm focused on and this is the content I provide to that audience?
Sure. So first, I just want to say I love what you were talking about and how common it is for people to fall into the trap of, feeling like they have to pick a niche and not knowing where to go. I was a generalist for a while before I really decided, okay, these are the clients I like to work with. These are the clients that pay me really well, so on and so forth. And for me, once I made that decision, it did have a huge impact on my business. It's so much easier to market yourself and to pitch clients. And, the number one thing that clients want to know is that, you get them and you can provide the services that they need. And the way that you stand out from a generalist is, having a track record of doing that or talking about that, online in your social media posts or in some other form of marketing. So I think that niching down is a great way to take your business to that next level when you know who you really like to work with.
Yeah, absolutely. That way you're not sort of committing a lot of your marketing resources either to this idea of, I'm committing to this one niche and then you realize that you don't like it. Or even another thing that's common is realizing that you don't want that to be your full-time niche. So maybe you make a lot of money from one niche and you like doing it, but it drives you a little bit crazy to be in that headspace all day long. And so it's okay to have some variety too. I think one of the biggest concerns freelancers have about niching down is, well, what about the projects I would turn down and not be able to work with? And I've found that that is so much less of an issue than most people imagine it would be. So like they'll stick in the generalist area for quite a while because they think, well, I'm not turning down any job. So like someone could come to me from any industry on any type of project within my service area and I'll be able to deliver it. But that also doesn't lend that sort of expertise label that a lot of clients are looking for. I have not seen that it means you have to turn down other jobs. I have had most of my clients be like 80% of them be in a very specific niche, but then I'll also be writing sales copy for a money mindset coach that month. And so it'll be completely different from everything else I'm doing, but that can be a good thing because it helps pull your brain and stretch it in different directions, but it doesn't mean you're doing the same thing all day long. So can you talk about sort of the next transition in your business? You found your niche. What sort of happened for you after that? You talk about these different challenges you faced or problems you encountered and figuring out where to go next with that. What was the next thing that sort of followed this pinning down of this is the person that I really like to work with?
Yeah. So after that, my business, it really just exploded. I did have a little bit of a period in there where I was struggling taking projects that were too small. And so that's actually something that I worked with you and we talked through a lot of, signing more retainers, things like that. And I was able to with your help, figure out how to do that. And once that happened, I just became so incredibly busy and had so much work on my plate. And I was resistant to outsourcing for a really long time. And it's still something that I struggle with a little bit because I just want to do all the things myself. But I started bringing in a little bit of help on some projects. And then I got to the point where I was thinking, okay, where do I go from here? Is it bringing on, more help on a full-time basis? Is it building an agency or something? And, this could change, but now that's not really something I'm interested in doing. I didn't want to grow a team, on the writing side to take on more writing work. So I had to explore other opportunities to sort of grow and change my business.
Yeah. And I talk about this idea a lot pretty early on in the Six-Figure Freelancer book of choosing to be agency or solo. And we often think of it as those being your only two options as a freelancer. Well, I have to outsource my work for my clients to subcontractors and build an agency if I want to make more money, or I have to do everything myself. And that's not true. You can find that middle ground of who can I hire in my business to give me some headspace and some physical time to do the things I want to do? And that set of tasks does not have to be related to your actual client projects. It might be, some of it might be that they're helping you get your client work done faster, or they're helping you manage your invoices or doing your bookkeeping, but you do not have to outsource client work in order to scale your business. And I think a lot of times that's a really common obstacle for a lot of freelancers who have the base skills and are looking to scale, but don't really know what that looks like next. So let's talk a little bit. You took this experience of wanting to have a portfolio or needing to have a place to drive clients to look at your work, and you actually built a tool to do just that for freelancers. So can you tell me more about how that idea came about and what that process looked like to make it a reality?
Sure. Yeah. So the plugin really came out of my own frustration, honestly. I had a portfolio on my website and I had tried a bunch of different plugins. And I had this idea in my head of what I wanted my portfolio to look like and how I wanted it to work. And I just couldn't find something that met those needs for me. And so my significant other had actually coded the portfolio page on my website for me. And a few years later, I was having a discussion with another coach that I work with. And they were like, hey, why don't you take that and, turn that into a product? Like, can you do that? Can you make it, a tool or a plugin? And all of a sudden I was like, oh, they're right. Like, we could turn this into something bigger. And so, then started the process of me saying, okay, well, how do I make a plugin? Because I had no idea.
Yeah. So where did you go from there? Now that you have this idea for a plugin, you probably ended up hiring other freelancers or an agency to help you build that, right? Like, what was your thought process? Like, I think that's such an unknown to so many people to create a plugin or to build something really technical, even though you spent a lot of time writing in the tech and the B2B SaaS space. What was your first step in, okay, I have an idea of what the end product might look like, but what do I do first with all the other steps that are in between?
Yeah. So I actually got really lucky in that, since my significant other had coded that page, like I said, I sort of went to him and I said, hey, is this a thing that we can do? Because I had no idea. But I talked to him about it and he knows several other developers. So he made a couple of recommendations to me and they actually started working on it together. So I had a team of 3 developers working with me and we had to sit down and they had to, sort of walk me through what it's like, what is possible. And I had to walk them through, okay, what is my vision for this? What features should it have? Why are those things important? And we collaborated together to kind of bring it to life.
And how long did that take sort of from idea to launched product?
For us, it took about 6 months. We were all working on it part-time though. It might've been a little faster if we were all working on it full-time, but we started working on it late December of 2020. And then we were done by the end of June of 2021 and we launched in July.
Did you learn anything interesting being on that other side of the table? Obviously, you've hired and worked with other freelancers before, but were there any other takeaways from working on a bigger project like this and outsourcing it to other people?
Yeah. I think for me, the biggest thing that I learned is just about the process of like giving very clear direction and also sort of the context behind that direction. Again, like why these certain things I'm asking for are important, but also being open to ideas. I'm not a developer. So being, told, hey, it's going to work a little bit better if we do it this way, or what about this? I think that it opened my mind even more to what's possible when you really collaborate with your clients. I've always really enjoyed working that way and trying to be collaborative, but I think we got the best possible product that we could have gotten out of really working together and listening to each other.
I love that because when you're hiring a freelancer, part of what you're hiring them for is their expertise. And as a freelancer yourself, you can also bring that approach to each interaction you have with your clients. Sometimes our clients have an idea of how they think they want something done, or they want to copy somebody else who they've seen be successful. And we sort of have to save them from themselves and say, okay, here's why that won't work for you. You're in an entirely different niche, or you're selling to another region and it's a totally different buyer persona. And so good clients, like you were when you hired these developers, will be able to explain what you're looking for and also be open to that feedback. If someone who's the expert and eats, sleeps, and breathes this particular thing comes back to you and says, I see what you're getting at, but there might be a better way to do this, or this might have bring a different perspective to it and ultimately get you better results. And so building that collaborative approach with clients is so important because if you have the client that thinks they're the expert and hiring you just to execute on the thing, you're essentially just doing tasks, right? And that's not where freelancers make money. It's where a lot of them get bored, and it's where they start to feel micromanaged. Whereas if you're working collaboratively with a client, you can charge more because you wear that strategist hat in addition to doing the tasks, but they're turning to you and saying, hey, I really love what you did with that. You wrote me this style of copy. Can you also do this style of copy? Or can you help me come up with my marketing plan for blah, blah, blah? And those are opportunities to get repeat business and referrals and testimonials, which are also important. So let's pivot a little bit to talking about what role does a website play as a marketing tool for freelancers today? Do you think freelancers need full-blown websites? Do you just recommend having something simple with your plugin, installed on it? I'd love to hear your sort of perspective on where you think that's at today.
Sure. Yeah, I think your website really grows with you as a business owner. So in the beginning, I think all that you need is a simple website with really just a portfolio page and a contact page. And that's about it. And that can serve you for a while. I think as your business grows and changes, you'll start to learn what your website might need. Are you going to do content marketing? Are you going to have a blog? What other pages do you need to have? A services page with your packages on it? I think it is wise to start with that foundation of a portfolio. And that's probably something that's always going to remain on your website in some capacity, and that your website should really grow and change with you. Because the thing that I see a lot is people thinking that they need this full-blown, complete niche down website before they even start freelancing. And that honestly scares me, because they invest all this time and sometimes money into developing this website when really they kind of flew past all the other core skills and knowledge that they needed to actually get started, and then end up with this website that isn't going to do much for them.
Yeah, that's really important. Like I always say, a website is only as good as the traffic that you're sending to it. And so there's no need to build this really complicated website when you first launch, because you're probably mostly going to be using that by linking to it yourself, right? When you're cold pitching clients and saying, hey, here's my portfolio, or here's a couple pieces of my portfolio that I'd like you to check out. And I see a lot of freelancers, like they try to launch this big thing. It takes 5 months, then they've spent a ton of money, and then they're like, I don't have any new clients from it. So it starts to feel like an expense rather than an investment, because you're hoping to recoup that investment. But keep it simple when you get started. And I think your plugin for your portfolio can really help with that. So can you talk a little bit more about how this actual plugin works?
Yeah, absolutely. So it is a WordPress plugin that you install, and you have a dashboard on the back end of your website. And the way that it works is from a single screen, you can title your portfolio piece. You can add a live link to it if you have one, if your work is live on a client's website, or you can upload it so that you can have your own link that lives on your website that people can click on. You can add your images to it, and then you can create tags for your work. So let's say, for example, you write ebooks, blog posts, and emails, right? You can create separate tags for each one of those projects and add them as you see fit to your portfolio items. And the really cool thing about it is that you can filter by those different categories, whatever categories you set. So if a client says, hey, do you have experience, writing ebooks, for example, you don't have to just send them to your portfolio page and let them figure it out. You can show them exactly what samples are going to be a good fit for them really easily.
Yeah. So let's go also into a little bit of the 101. Like most freelancers are pretty tech savvy and they understand website basics, but what is WordPress? Like I'm not, you don't have to give the official definition, but like, what does that mean for the context of a freelancer? What does that mean? Like that you can use the plugin on WordPress versus like, how do I know if I have a site that isn't compatible with that, for example?
Yeah, so WordPress is a content management system, and we went with WordPress because the majority of the world's websites are on WordPress at the moment. So if you have a WordPress website and you have access to WordPress plugins, which most sites do, unless you're on like a very strange plan, but you can go into the back end of your WordPress website, select plugins, and then search for all kinds of plugins by name. You hit one button to install. And basically what that does is it extends the capabilities that you have on your website. So you can basically add additional features to your site that you wouldn't otherwise have, or maybe something that you would otherwise have to hire a developer to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's really smart. So even though WordPress itself can be super complicated and lots of really big websites with tons and tons of subpages are built on WordPress, that does not obligate you to build a really complicated site on WordPress. But like she was just mentioning, this is really the gold standard of websites. It's one of the easiest tools to use. If you keep it simple, you can really easily do things like add blog posts or add media elements. And installing plugins is another huge benefit because there are so many plugins on WordPress. I don't even know what the numbers would be, if it's thousands or tens of thousands. There's a lot out there, and they'll help you run your website more effectively. But even though it's more advanced than a template site like Wix or Squarespace might be, WordPress, it allows you to grow with it, and you could also decide to be as simple or as complicated as you want. And I just think all of the options with SEO and with adding plugins really make it something to consider when you're launching your first website. So don't be afraid that you have to make things super complicated. So tell us where people can go to learn more about the plugin and check it out. I know you have a free version too, which I think is a huge benefit for freelancers to figure out, get a little bit of that WordPress experience, install the plugin, upload your first couple of samples and see how it works. Where can people go to find that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can find the free version of the plugin by going into the backend of your WordPress, into the plugin section, and just searching Genius Portfolio. Or you can find the premium version and more details about the free version by going to getgeniusportfolio.com.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining me today on the show. I encourage freelancers to go check that out. This is a great tool that isn't going to require hard coding or really complicated things or hosting your portfolio on someone else's website. So definitely check this out as a way to showcase your work and to drive clients to those great work samples. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks so much for having me.